All right, there you have it. And there is the Great Seal of the State of California meeting, as judges said. Time for a mid-morning break. We have our experts standing by. We'll be talking about this continued cross-examination of Dr. Kamigar. Again, he's a sleep expert, deals with sleep medicine. Also, we heard yesterday his expertise in pulmonology and critical care. But we've really been zoning in on propofol as a sleep aid, and we heard the words one more time that this doctor's saying it's incomprehensible. It is egregious. Want to bring in Michael Barnes, and Michael brings unique expertise here. He's an attorney plus a drug policy advisor, and on just a sheer big picture level, once again, and I think it does stick with the jury. I want to get your take. You get to see and hear this is what a responsible doctor would do, and all the steps that you take to deal with someone who's having trouble sleeping. You don't just stuff them with sedatives and propofol, right?
That's right. I think this morning we've seen that the defense itself has enabled the prescriber Conrad Murray to be characterized as a script doc, as someone who is a private pill mill for Michael Jackson. And actually, that would be something that typically would be favorable to the prosecution. It's coming out on the defense side because they are grasping, and just really not being effective at making their case with these two experts.
Got it. Let's bring in Attorney Jeffrey Shapiro. Jeffrey, how do you think the morning's gone? Do you think Flanagan's doing a job? Do you think he's making any points here?
You know, I think he's doing something which he's basically asking questions which is allowing the witness to give these long narrative answers, which is enabling the witness to reestablish his credibility. It's a long, rambling cross-examination, which I'm very surprised that he's taking that tact.
What would you do, Jeffrey? What are you seeing when you mention what's opening the door for the long rambling? And again, and I agree with you, just sitting here watching every time, it's like, wow, this guy knows what he's talking about. How do you cut that off, Jeffrey?
Well, first of all, you know, long doesn't necessarily mean good. And he's got some points to make, primarily that there was the study where at least there's some doctor out there, Dr. Zhu, who apparently thinks that propofol could be used to help sleep. I mean, that, I think, is his strongest point. Although I'm not sure he's got Dr. Zhu to come to court, and if he doesn't, he could be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, Michael, let's get your take. We've heard it yesterday, we hear it again today. And let's keep in mind, this study was done after Michael Jackson dies. This wasn't information that you can say Conrad Murray had before, and he can say, well, I read this study, and it was propofol was effectively used. This is after Michael Jackson's dead. Does it score any points, Michael?
Not at all, because as the doctor said this morning, that study also excluded people who had the underlying conditions that might have been contributing to insomnia. So they were pure insomniacs without any other sorts of conditions attached. And we know that the defense is trying to characterize Michael Jackson as one who had dependence on medications, or perhaps even withdrawal from medication. So that would have excluded him from this study anyway.
Okay, let's listen here, guys, and again, this is a preview, I believe anyway, of what the defense is going to do, the Demerol defense. Anytime the defense can get out Arnie Klein's name and the word Demerol, they're going to do that. So let's listen to that as J. Michael Flanagan did that this morning. Here we go.
See, in reviewing those records, that Arnold Klein had given Mr. Jackson approximately 6,500 milligrams of Demerol during that period of time?
I do understand that he was treating Mr. Jackson with Demerol, yes.
And did you notice that every time he got Demerol, he was also getting midazolam?
I did see instances of that as well.
Did you form an opinion as to whether or not Mr. Jackson had a Demerol problem as a result of a review of those records?
Dr. Vegas, the Demerol problem.
Do you understand it?
You know, I can't really answer that question based on purely the records that I have available from Dr. Klein.
So there you go. In a sense, I think the defense gets a little bit of going on offense a little bit. I believe that's a preview of what's coming up. The Demerol defense, and they continue to hit on that point. So when we come back, we'll hit on that point as well. How effective was that today? And is that an effective defense for Michael Jackson, for Conrad Murray moving forward? This that Michael Jackson was having Demerol withdrawals, and that led to the insomnia. Does that matter? We'll get our experts to weigh in, and you can weigh in as well. HLNTV.com/Michael Jackson. We have our People's Choice segment there, where the question is, to you, who is the prosecution witness that HLN's continuing coverage of the Michael Jackson death trial continues. That seal over my shoulder, the Great Seal of the state of California, means that court is in recess right now, taking their morning break. When the proceedings resume, we'll get you right back into the Los Angeles County Courthouse. And continuing cross-examination, Jail Michael Flanagan on Dr. Kamingar. Again, he's a sleep expert, pulmonology, critical care. And through this, thought the defense team kind of went on offense a little bit, getting out Dr. Klein's name, Demerol. And my question, I'm sure many of you have the same one. Does it matter if Michael Jackson was addicted and had withdrawals from Demerol? Let's bring in our attorneys. Jeffrey Shapiro, also with us. Michael Barnes, attorney and drug policy advisor. So, Michael, I'll give you first crack at this one. Does that matter in this case, and how much does it?
It matters, but it matters for the prosecution, because if a person has an addictive disorder or is showing signs of drug seeking, the prescriber who is giving care to that individual has an extra greater duty of caution. You make sure that you're going to do extra special treatment for this particular patient, because you know there's a greater risk in this case of abuse of the medications. Now, we heard also today from the defense that they're going to likely say, well, the patient wasn't forthright with the doctor in this case. But that's okay, because we heard then from the expert, he is preempting this defense, saying, well, sorry, there are other things you can do also. You can check with the family members. You can do a drug test. You can just basically gather information through other records, get them from other doctors, from the hospital. So as much as the defense is trying, they're not getting very far.
Got it. Okay. Jeffrey, what's your take on this one? Can that Demerol defense be effective or not?
There is nothing in the medicine that's going to be of any help whatsoever to this defense. I mean, there's absolutely nothing in the medicine. The fact of the matter is, as just pointed out, as anybody who's taken pain medication knows, the more you take it, the more immune you become to it, the more you have to take. So if you've got a person here who's has been taking Demerol and other sedatives, the worst thing you could do medically would be to pour more sedatives on him and then introduce an anesthetic in a non-emergency room hospital setting. This, from a medical standpoint, this can't help the defense in any manner.
Yeah. Michael, you're pointing it out. It seems like Flanagan's trying. I'm not sure if he's scoring or not. And I thought someone had a faux pas here when he was talking about medical records. Because, come on, we're all potential patients, and we want our doctors to write down the medication we're taking, what are our vital signs, and Dr. Kamingar's pointing that out. But Flanagan almost is suggesting, well, he could kind of keep it in his head, couldn't he? Let's listen to that.
Where would he get this information from anyway? There's no monitors in the room, so how's he going to get his pulse oximetry? How's he going to get his oxygen levels and everything else? There's no equipment.
That's a good point. But he did say, Dad, the pulse oximeter working. Do we have that soundbite, guys, about medical records? Okay, let's listen to that. Well, let's see what went down here in court.
We as clinicians, taking even care of that one patient that we're doing a procedure on, we still look at trends while we're doing it. We don't just rely on memory. So I would disagree with that. I would say that information is imperative, not just for review later, but as we are taking care of patients.
So you have concluded that as a result of Dr. Murray not writing this stuff down as he went along, that he doesn't know it. Is that your conclusion?
Overruled.
I'm saying that there is no good way to really be able to follow patterns, and it can be a recipe for disaster.
There you go. I mean, when we're talking about our medical care, we want it written down. Michael, I don't even like it when I go to a restaurant and the waiter or waitress tries to memorize my order. I even want that written down.
I'm with you, Mike, absolutely. And, you know, we're not talking about just one moment in time at 3 a.m. on the night before Michael Jackson died that there wasn't a record of the blood pressure or the other vital signs. We're talking about an entire year, because Conrad Murray did not produce medical records for all of 2009. So when this expert comes back and says we're talking about patterns over time, we're talking about more than just covering yourself for litigation. This is about providing quality care. He makes the point, and I don't see how the defense can keep pushing on this.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Jeffrey, the last couple of days, we had the cardiologist, Dr. Steinberg, very powerful witness, laid out the 6 points there of gross negligence that led to Michael Jackson's death. Now they're following up with Kamingar. It's basically making the same points. Do you like where the prosecution's going with this? They're really just laying it out there.
Absolutely. Look, this case, in my view, is not defensible from a medical standpoint. I cannot believe that any credible doctor will take the stand on behalf of Dr. Murray to say that what he did was within the standard of care. Because the bottom line is this. Anybody who's gone to a hospital, anybody who's had a medical procedure knows they take a lot of information before the anesthesiologist does anything to you. What happened here was this was a doctor who was not even qualified to administer anesthesia, who was not only doing something he didn't know how to do, but doing it in a bedroom without proper medical devices or care. There is no doctor anywhere who's going to come to court and say that that was appropriate. And when the patient went into arrest, even a pristine patient who could go into cardiac or respiratory arrest, this doctor didn't know how to treat it. He was treating the wrong thing.
Jeffrey, then what's your best defense? What do you do when you take over? When the defense takes over, where are they going?
You know, look, I mean, I understand that everybody has to put forth the defense, but we're talking about the medicine here. And the bottom line of it is there is no medical defense to what this doctor did. None, in my view.
Wow. Oh, Michael, I know you're chomping at the bit here. What about, let me throw out the scenario, and we've kind of heard it from the defense, where there's no drip. The defense cannot have any kind of IV propofol drip. It's just a 25 milligram injection. So Murray injected that, and he figures, okay, 15 minutes is out of his system, and at that point, Michael is sleeping on his own. He's tired. He's been up all night. Everybody's safe. I can leave the room. Well, talk to me.
That's so inconsistent with what the experts have said that what they're trying to do here with this defense doesn't really take them anywhere. They're going to try to limit their facts to one point in time, and that will be when they say that Michael Jackson took 8 pills and then somehow injected himself with more propofol. But we heard yesterday from the expert, who was great, by the way, and both of these experts, I think, really pair well with each other, and they are doing a great job. So anyway, we heard that you've got to constantly treat these patients as though they're at risk, and that if you know that someone has a risk of getting the drugs and injecting them or otherwise, you don't put them in that situation. You do not put a drug seeker in a situation with room of drugs. Come on.
And we saw the powerful image of all those vials sitting there right in front of the jury that were recovered from Michael Jackson's bedroom. Great stuff, guys. The jury's been called, so when we come back, I almost guarantee that we'll be back into court. You're not going to miss a moment right here on HLN. Stay with us.
Policy advisor as well as an attorney, because I'm starting to see this as a chess game where different pieces are being knocked off. Now you have the defense saying, we can't use oral ingestion, that we can't argue that Michael Jackson chug-a-lug this. So let's use the Demerol defense. But they're also being cut off at the path there, because every time that they try to point to Michael Jackson as having a problem, the prosecution witnesses say all the more reason not to give him a slew of drugs.
Yes, you're right, Jane. This is what you and I had been hoping all along. You and I have been saying this since before the beginning of the trial, I think, that when you have a person who has a history of substance abuse or is showing signs of drug seeking, you take extra precautions and you do not leave that person in the room with these medications that, frankly, the probable result is overdose. And that's where you get to the causation element, regardless of whether or not Michael Jackson self-administered. What I noticed that was so important of both of these two witnesses who finished is they both said that even if Michael Jackson self-administered, still the doctor's behaviors, Conrad Murray's behaviors, were the direct cause of Michael Jackson's death.
You know, it's interesting, and I want to go out to Ted Rollins for this one.
Michael Barnes, you're the drug policy advisor and an attorney. That's where it's going to get down to the nitty-gritty of medical details that are very confusing, and the jurors are not doctors.
Well, we heard from two very qualified doctors who did say, though, that the standard of care requires that these types of precautions be taken, and that even if there were self-administration on the part of Michael Jackson, that the direct cause would still be the negligent behavior of Conrad Murray. So listening to those two experts...
Wait a second. Let me do a follow-up question here. Let's assume for a second that the jury goes, well, even if he did give it to himself, I don't necessarily buy that it's Dr. Conrad Murray's fault, even if Michael Jackson gave it to himself. Is that an opening for the defense, Michael?
Well, sure. I think that's pretty much the only way that the defense can actually win this case. It has to be someone on the jury who says, you know what, this Conrad Murray just seems like a nice guy. He loved Michael Jackson, and I don't think it was his fault. It's got to be, you know, you've talked to the people out on the street who are fans of Conrad Murray's. Someone like that on the jury might be someone who, you know, basically prevents a guilty verdict, but it won't be based on the technical expertise of these medical experts by any means.
All right, see, that's interesting, but Jane, that makes